Alright, so we're going to finally discuss Lucas's plans, his original plans for episodes 7, 8, 9. I'm going to stress the word plans because he had different ideas at different points in time in terms of what he planned to do and how he was going to approach things. I'm going to refer to it as the Plan Alpha or Plan A and Plan Beta, Plan B, just analytically, because we're going to see they're very different conceptions, and I'm lumping together a lot of different ideas because he never has given a full, straight, honest idea of what he wanted. He now says, well, I only planned 1 to 6. That's my story. That's Star Wars. I'm George Lucas. I'm a genius. This kind of shtick. But no, he always had ideas for not just 3 trilogies, but 4 trilogies. He went up to episode 12. But he's gone back and forth in terms of what he wanted to do and his ideas. So we can only kind of try to roughly approximate because he's never given a full, honest, history of his own ideas. So bear with me because, the narration needs to be a little stream of consciousness because he kept revising what he wanted to do. Okay, so the original idea was that, which I've already covered this, but that Vader was not his father. Luke's father was still Anakin Skywalker. And the original concept for, episodes 4, 5, 6 was Luke would confront Vader, but he was not going to face the Emperor. Palpatine was not going to really show up. Palpatine was going to be defeated, but not just by Luke. In the original idea, Plan A, basically, Luke's sister, not Leia, by the way. Leia was not his sister at this point. Lucas did not finalize that. But Luke's sister, who is a Force user, who's much more powerful than he is, and this should sound familiar, this is basically Rey. Luke, she finds him, this is in episodes, 7, 8, and 9, where he's secluded. We don't know at this point if Luke is jaded or disillusioned, but it seems like he went with that idea. So she finds him. Together they face the Emperor, but she's much more powerful. But, he helps out by training her and things like that. So that was the original idea. Plan A was Luke's sister and him were going to confront the Emperor in episodes 7, 8, and 9. And the details are kind of sketchy, because he ultimately did not pursue this. Of course, we know that ultimately, Leia became Luke's sister, and he kind of merged the ideas for 7, 8, and 9 into 5 and 6. And so he just scrunched the ideas together. But apparently he still thought about, the Emperor's still alive, actually, after episode 6, and somehow a new threat arises, and, Luke has to help new Jedi confront it. Okay, but now we get into the late 80s and 90s, and he kept changing it. The original idea for the prequels was, in 1, 2, and 3, it was Kenobi. That was going to be the Kenobi trilogy, so it was going to be Kenobi, then Luke, and then this new generation of Jedi. And Luke does play so a part, but it was basically this handing off of, power or Jedi knowledge to the new generation. And Mark Hamill, in some early interviews in the 1980s, says that George talked to him about, it was kind of this Excalibur story. So that was the new Plan B conception of 7, 8, and 9. It was basically Luke handing power to a new generation. He was very old, disgruntled, he was very cynical. If this sounds familiar, this is Ryan, episode 8, which George likes, because again, this was basically his original idea. So people think he's character assassination, betraying Lucas. No. Lucas wanted a disgruntled, disillusioned Luke, and the focus was, going to be on new young people. But the original concept was these 2 adventurers called Sam and Kira. If you've seen Solo, the movie, Kira shows up, but they've changed her. Her name is Qira in Solo, but the original Kira starts with a K. But again, he didn't finalize ideas. It's a little vague and all over the place. Apparently, they have to search for some Vader artifacts or some Sith artifacts. There's this being called a Jedi killer who Luke trained. This would become Kylo, though the original idea was apparently Darth Talon. That was going to be the Jedi killer. And I think he also had a female apprentice. So there are these Jedi killers hunting down Jedi. Luke is disillusioned, but he trains new Jedi, and this includes Sam and Kira, and they go off and help Luke. And there were some script ideas. I mean, they did go a little further down this with Michael Arndt, who helped out in scripting things. But as he says, they kept changing back and forth in terms of what Kira and Sam were eventually. So initially, they were these lonely adventurers, and they just meet Luke accidentally. But a lot of the old concepts, like Plan A, still held. Kira was supposed to be amazingly powerful with the Force, and Luke just guides her. But it was basically going to be their adventure in the new trilogy. But again, later on, he once again revised his ideas and said, I was going to do more of the Whills. Now, people are going to be confused, who the hell or what are the Whills? But if you watch the prequels with the midichlorians, the Whills are the midichlorians. The midichlorians are little beings in our cells. They provide the force. But the question becomes, well, what is going on with them? Well, the Whills essentially communicate through the midichlorians. They're these godlike beings, essentially the equivalent of these cosmic, powerful, again, no pun intended, forces. And they guide the midichlorians, and the midichlorians guide life. And his idea was, I'm going to concentrate on that, how the Whills affect us at the microbiotic level. But again, I've seen the concept art for 7, 8, and 9. Again, his ideas, and yes, that's there, but it seemed to be merged with this adventure story. However, it was not Skywalker-centric. I mean, Luke plays a role, but it was not really his story. So I'm not sure how this was going to work. I guess he was going to go back and forth between the microbiotic world of the Whills and the macrobiotic world, the macro world with Sam and Kira and their adventure. And episodes 7, 8, and 9 were going to be packed with nostalgia. There was going to be the throne room, the Millennium Falcon was underwater. Again, a lot of references to the OT and prequels. But again, at least according to him, he was going to venture into new territory with the Whills, explaining more of the cosmology and the religion of the Jedi and things like that. We were going to have female priests. He was going to go more into the world building and new worlds in terms of where Luke was going to end up. But again, in large measure, if you've seen the sequel trilogy, they actually did take a huge amount of this. Because if you see The Force Awakens, you'll see a huge destroyed Death, Star Killer in the background when Daisy is, being a scavenger. So they took parts of this concept art, and even the concepts of Luke being disillusioned and Han dying. That was also original. They always planned to kill Han, and Ford was told about this, and he wanted this. So in his conversations with Lucas, he made clear that Han was going to die, and Ford was okay with that. So again, even though there are still major differences between the Disney sequels and what he did, they're much more conventional, much more action filled. They're not as radically separate as a lot of people have stated, even people who have done their own videos on the episodes. Now, Bob Iger says George felt betrayed that they didn't go with his own concepts of the original plans. However, it seems if you to go more carefully through it, when he announced the first iteration of 7, 8, and 9, he did it in 2012, and he clearly did it in a way to negotiate with Disney. He was saying, well, I'm going to do a new trilogy, and if, I'm going to do it, and he's going to build up excitement for it, and he contacted Mark Hamill in the original cast, and that's when he entered into negotiations with Disney. So I'm not quite sure what the plan was. I guess he thought he could basically hustle them into buying his stories, and essentially they would pay to do his films. And Bob Iger, though, made clear in his autobiography, no, we're paying for the corporate ownership of Star Wars. We're not paying for particularly these stories. We'll pay for them, but we're not obligated to use them. So there's a lot of going back and forth. And Lucas himself, even though he's done a lot of interviews like, they went their own way, they betrayed the vision, he's actually never been completely clear about what exactly he did, what he meant by story treatments. Because if you know Hollywood and film industry, seriously, treatments can mean a lot of things. It can mean 1 or 2 pages. It can mean 4 or 5 pages. It could be the whole plot lines. He's never been actually completely clear about what he meant, only that his version was going to be much more experimental, much more on the Whills, much more on this young generation. Of course, there are still major differences. The original idea was a Sam and Kira adventure story. The Disney trilogy became much more a Kylo Rey story. But again, versions of Kylo as this Jedi hunter-killer were there from the very beginning. In fact, Adam Driver was originally cast long before Daisy Ridley. Daisy came in much, much later. So they were already playing with ideas of, how they were going to integrate, quote, the Jedi hunter or killer, this apprentice of Luke, and how he was going to be the antagonist. So again, there are still a lot of differences, but not as many as people believe. And the Whills go back all the way to the original version of Star Wars. I mean, they're in the first ever script he had of Star Wars, but he cut them out because they were just, the original scripts were just too bulky, and he wasn't going to be able to sell them. But if you've seen the crawls, they are the crawls. The people who are doing the crawls are the Whills. They're basically recording history from a cosmic perspective. So we've always seen the Whills. They've just never been directly in at least the original trilogy and prequels. But if you've paid careful attention to Rogue One, we actually get reference of the Whills. some of the characters are guardians of the Whills. So they've now been inserted into the canon, but again, it's been very small. So there's still a lot more to go through in terms of what the differences are between the Disney versions and his versions. But again, we still don't have complete access to the original scripts or the original story ideas, so we can only speculate to what degree they really diverged, the way they collaborated. But the basic storyline that, JJ destroyed his vision or, betrayed him is not true. JJ was, very much in touch because he was doing Star Trek at the time in 2012. And at least initially, Lucas was not hostile. So again, it's not clear who is lying or who is, quote, misrepresenting the past. But I'm only here to do a documentary style. So this is basically the summation of what we have. He had a plan A and a plan B. The plan A was going to be Luke's sister, and plan B was going to be Kira, Sam, the Jedi hunter / killer, and the Millennium Falcon underwater, and this search for these artifacts, and the Whills. So the Whills are probably the major difference between these two versions, because the Whills only figure very small in the Disney sequels. So that does it. This has been a very broad brush summation of George Lucas's ideas for episodes 7, 8, and 9. Again, I'm not giving a preference which ones I like or don't like. I mean, obviously people will decide for themselves whether Lucas's ideas were way more interesting and they should have done those. This has been Star Wars Analyzed on Lucas's ideas for episodes 7, 8, and 9. Star Wars Analyzed. If you like the content, please like or subscribe. If you want to give suggestions for future content, please email at the appropriate email. Star Wars Analyzed, the original idea for episodes 7, 8, and 9. Thank you for listening.